All right, well, thank you. I'm excited to hear what questions you have for me today. So I know that you mentioned you have a question about how to best find a mentor.
What is a like what would be like the best practice in terms of finding one? Any word of advice would be appreciated.
So that's a really great question. And what's really interesting that at least at the MPH level, so when I was applying to MPH programs, I didn't even look up specific professors. I just sort of applied to a bunch of programs and see where I got in. And it wasn't until I accepted my spot at Yale that they then reached out to me and was like, okay, you're in the Department of Social Behavioral Sciences. Your academic advisor is going to be, professor, whoever that is. And then generally they try to make a match based on what you put in your personal statement and your application, with matching you to a faculty member who is taking on MPH student um, advisees. But essentially, that person is going to be your academic advisor, the one that's assigned to you. And you don't have to only go to them for everything. So, but that's just someone that you automatically will get assigned to. And I think this is pretty standard across the board with different programs, is you always get assigned to some form of academic advisor or mentor. And they're sort of your go-to person throughout the program, especially if you just have like academic questions, like what classes to take, like am I on track to graduate, what do I need to do for my internship, etc. requirements. They're there for that bare minimum. And then from there you can decide, okay, is this person assigned to me also a good fit with my public health interests? And like, is their research, is what their work similar to what I want to do? And then if the answer is yes, you just kind of keep working with that person you got matched to. Or, you can have that advisor of yours, the assigned advisor, recommend like, oh, I know these other faculty members or professors within the School of Public Health, the department, etc., that actually might be a better match for you in terms of the work you want to do in X, Y, and Z field or area, and have their expertise is kind of more in line with what you want to do. And then facilitate those connections for you. And then, so that's kind of what I did with my advisor at Yale, is we had a little bit of overlap, but not a ton of overlap. And after sort of hearing a little bit more about what I wanted to do with like young adult mental health and substance use, he recommended you should reach out to like these other professors in the department. They might have research projects that are actually more related to what you want to do and can like give you some like experience in that field. So that's one way to like that you'll get assigned a mentor, and then you can also utilize that mentor to make more connections once you get to your program. And then the second, more cold emailing approach, which I'm actually a huge fan of, is I think as an MPH student, you have that weight attached to you. You can say like, I am an MPH student at UC Berkeley, and I would like to work with you, and then send that sort of a cold email out to a professor that you just like look up online and, think that their work matches what you want to do and that you want to learn from them. And sort of start networking and, be honest and say, I really admire the work you do. I really, I've read up on your research, or like really, see that you're pioneering the work in this field. Can, you serve as sort of like a mentor for me as I go through my public health journey, and include that all in a nice email. And I think you would be surprised by how many positive responses you'll get back from an email like that. It's very flattering to receive an email like that from, a student. So I hope that helps you in thinking of like finding mentors, and also not to be intimidated by the thought of finding mentors. I think that it can seem, I actually went to UC Berkeley as an undergrad where I had zero face time basically with any professors. So the thought of like emailing or talking to professors in grad school was like a whole different ball game for me. And I was almost shocked, when I would send an email to a professor and get a response within 5 minutes, So I think professors are there and mentors are there because they like to mentor students. So I think you will have less trouble finding mentors, than maybe you may expect.
I see. So based on what you told me so far, it seems like it's pretty common to find a mentor within your academic institution that you are like pursuing your MPH in, but also it's not uncommon to reach out externally to professors in other universities or other organizations and things like that. It's
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So as a individual who is just starting to apply for this program, I'm thinking like part of the reason why I'm seeking for mentor is that I have some idea as to what I want to focus on, but I think it's also nice to have someone who could guide you. I think like you can go into something thinking that you're gonna be doing that, and then maybe like a quarter into the studies or you're like, okay, this is not what I want to do. I want to maybe pivot and do something else within MPH. I think you've mentioned that it's not good to do that. Like it's better to have a clear goal and then go in rather than finding out midway, okay, well, I thought I was gonna go into social determinant of health, but then now I think I'm gonna go into policy.
So I think that you might be getting mistaken of, I think that it's hard to switch departments. Like, let's say you're in the department for I don't know what school department, but let's say there's a department for social determinants of health, and then you want to actually switch your departmental affiliation to policy. There might be some administrative hoops you'll have to jump through, and certain schools might not let you do that easily. But if you want to just stay in the social determinants of health department and then focus everything you do on policy, that is totally fine. And I think that's what a lot of students end up doing. And I think it's okay to pivot. Like, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I started my MPH. And, I took some time to figure that out. And then as I figured that out, I like grew my network of mentors to then match what I was looking for. But I kind of went in being sort of like, I want to study anything broadly related to like adolescent health, maybe like even sexual health. That's what I thought I wanted to do. But that ended up pivoting into more substance use prevention, among adolescents and not just like young people or young adults.
So do you think it's very messy to jump into different focus when you try out for different program, or do you think I should just stay like on course, stick to health policy like across the board?
So are you saying like, is it okay to apply to health policy for one program and then aging and health for another school?
Yes. Do you
Oh,
think like wasting my time? Am I like using my resources and time like wisely? Or do I like really need to sit down and like tell myself, okay, like this is gonna be very messy. Just stay focused on one course.
I think that it's
Okay.
okay for you to apply broad. Like, if anything, that'll just give you more options, when you're deciding. Um, I don't think it's messy. I think it's okay. I mean, that's a personal choice for you. I mean, if, like I said, it's just going to give you more options at the end of the day and might make your decision harder if you're like, well, I really want to go to Hopkins, but I really want to do policy, but then I also really want to be in California. It might be messier in terms of giving you more options, but I never think that having more options is necessarily a bad thing. So I would
I
just
see.
apply to the department and the concentration at each school that, kind of like what you said, speaks to you, has, like, when you're reading about the program, has descriptions that excite you. If you have the time and energy, you can look up some of the faculty in that department, and see if they are people that you would want, mentoring you and teaching your courses. So that's the kind of like, extra step research you could do, but I don't think you have to apply to the same thing across the board. That's definitely not a rule and definitely not a limitation.
Is it common for people who are just considering the program to reach out to faculty staff and ask questions and ask for their time for conversations?
Yeah, so when I meant like looking up faculty in my last answer, I meant just like researching like reading their profiles online, not actually reach out to them yet. I would definitely say that um as an MPH student, I personally did not contact a single faculty member before applying. I didn't even write about any faculty members in my personal statement, which that might be a good thing to do now, kind of in hindsight. But there's absolutely no need to reach out to professors when applying to MPH programs. That's definitely more of a PhD thing. And I'm hearing more and more these days that there's less programs that are even like allowing their faculty to talk to students, PhD students or PhD applicants before the deadline.
I
So
see.
don't worry at all about having to reach out to professors before submitting your MPH application or really before getting to campus. Cause I agree, I think it's too early.
How do you feel about incorporating like a course or the professor's name in the statement of purpose?
Again, I didn't do this in my MPH personal statement, and in hindsight, I wish I did. That was probably one of the. This is why I don't share my MPH personal statement because it was really not well written. But
Yeah, I mean, obviously it you did very well. You had other good stuff going on.
yeah, well, but
Yeah.
so do include the professor names,
Uh,
even though you haven't met with them or talked to them at all. I mean, don't, I would just phrase it in that sense of like, I would want to go to this program in this department because of professor, doctor, whoever, and then mention like a line or two about like what work they do and why that matches your public health interests and be like, I would be really excited to learn among these faculty, etc. And then you can drop some courses too in there. I think just that just shows that you like took the time to like look into their program and look them up and like think about kind of how you would academically thrive in the program once you're there.
in the recent video they posted, you said, don't worry about ranking. Don't get stuck on it. At the end of the day, MPH is an MPH is an MPH. I think that's the point that you're trying to make. But also part of you feel like because you're in Yale, like it's kind of like you it's a bit easier for you to say that as opposed to maybe someone who is on the 100th ranking in terms of the program. I don't know if it makes any sense to you,
No, I
but
get that. And that's a huge disclaimer. I probably should have said that when I recorded that part of the video is like, this might sound strange coming from someone who went to Harvard, Yale, and UC Berkeley for
yes,
all
like
public health training.
I
Um,
wanted to hear like your journey, like why did you choose? Obviously because you could, but like what was their motivation behind choosing all these great
yeah.
schools?
So
I
this
mean, you have many choices, obviously.
Yeah. So, I mean, this story might help you. And I've talked about this in some of my prior videos. So I was deciding between UCLA and Yale for my MPH program. And Yale was, I think at that time ranked like a little bit lower. Like I think it was 16 or something like that, number 16. Whereas UCLA was, I think, number 9. So UCLA was arguably a higher ranked program. And I was actually quite convinced that I was going to go to UCLA because I was like, it's in California. I'll be close to my parents. The weather's nice. I visited it and I thought it was great. I made friends at the open house. I like They had like a running club that I wanted to join. It was just this like I went and visited and it seemed like it was the perfect place for me. And then I went and visited UCLA. Sorry, I then went and visited Yale. And wow, that was just like a completely different experience. I felt like I was just kind of like envisioning a completely different life, you know? And I think that was sort of like the big thing that the decision didn't then turned into not like number 9 UCLA versus number 16 Yale. It turned into, do I want to go to this school, UCLA, that is comfortable for me? I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, so it would be very similar. And I think that's why I liked it so much, is because it felt so familiar to me. And another big thing is that it would have cost me way less to go to UCLA because of my in-state tuition, because I was a California resident.
Sure, sure.
And then I was like, well, but then there's also Yale, where like, I've been living in California my entire life. I don't really have that much experience like outside of sort of this bubble that I've created for myself. And it might be worthwhile for me to like break out of my comfort zone and just go somewhere completely different, completely new, study at a completely different type of institution and challenge myself in that way. And boy, was it a challenge. Moving across the country, I like cried my eyes out when my parents dropped me off, after helping me move into my apartment in New Haven, because it was just such a big
Uh,
change, and really overwhelming for me. And as difficult as that decision and transition was for me, I look back and I'm very glad that I did that. And I actually don't know if I would be where I am now if I had gone to UCLA and just sort of stayed in my lane and my comfort zone. So that's why, I mean, again, I was still choosing between two very well ranked schools. So I get that. But I would say that the decision was never about like which school is better, like which school will look better on my resume. I mean, it was kind of, they both would have done the same thing for me, but it really came down to sort of the other things that I mentioned that are important when deciding where you want to go and how you want to grow in that experience, at least for me at that time.
yes, yes, of
Um,
course.
but I also just kind of outside of my own personal experiences, like, I've talked to people who've gotten MPHs at schools that are not as highly ranked at some of these schools I've been talking about, and they still get amazing MPH experiences. I mean, they're accredited, so across the board, they're taking similar core courses. And I think that what's really great is that each school of public health oftentimes is like very interrelated and interconnected with their community partnerships in their local communities. And I think that's also a big thing to consider too, is um, that is actually going to provide you with more of the experience that you might be looking for versus like, okay, how high is it ranked? If that makes sense. Uh,
Yes, thank you. And did you always know that you wanted to pursue PhD from the get-go, or is it something that kind of came to you in the middle of the education?
So I think that in the back of my mind, I had never written it off. So when I started my MPH, I was like, I have no idea what I want to do, but I don't want to shut out the idea of potentially getting a PhD. I want to consider that. But it wasn't until I got my internship experience. So for the summer in between my first and second year, I actually I also didn't do this purposefully, but I ended up getting a more research oriented internship, working with who is now my current mentor actually, at Stanford, doing substance use prevention, school-based education, research. And that time was the summer of 2018, which is when Juul and e-cigarettes suddenly became really popular among adolescents. I don't know if you remember that a couple of years ago. And I was sort of at the forefront of helping conduct some really like exciting new research. And as someone who had no research experience before that, just found it so fun and exciting. And one day, my mentor just like sat me down and chatted with me and was like, "Hey, like heart to heart, like, where do you want to go after this?" And I was like, I want to be like you. I want to be conducting research, yes, but I also really want to be a professor. I want to mentor students. I want to work with students and teach. And she looks at me and she's like, "Well, if you want to do both of those, you have to get a PhD in order to become a professor." And I was like, okay, I guess that needs to happen now. So I decided when I got back to campus to finish up my MPH that second year that I was just going to apply straight away, not to lose any momentum. But that's kind of how it happened. It really was sort of I had it in the back of my mind, but it did take me having a really great internship experience doing that sort of research to give me the final push to, you know, do it.
Yes, and you had all the right resources at the time, or like you were encouraged to go into the direction. But I think you were probably ready, when you're ready, and then all these things happen to you, you're like, yeah, it's my chance to shine, and then it happens. That's great. So you always knew that you would like you wanted to go into teaching at some point in your life.
Yes, I knew I loved teaching and
Yes.
education and working with students. I just didn't realize it was going to take me down the path of like academia. Like, at one point I thought I would maybe consider being like a community health educator, and actually doing some of the, school-based prevention work. But again, because I really found it thrilling to do the research component of things and love leading projects, etc. I yeah, came down this route as well. But yeah, there was a point when I thought I wanted to do more kind of like, being the actual educator type work.
Yes, that's great. That's great. I have one more question, Jessica. It's about managing high tuition. Grad school is expensive. It's quite expensive. Aside from like the opportunities that's given within each institution, is there anything else you would recommend looking into just to manage the whole finance behind this really pricey education?
So that is the unfortunate thing, is that grad school is very expensive. And this is not just for MPH programs, but across the board. Master's programs are very expensive, even at, state schools with in-state tuition. It is a huge commitment. And it's not just that you have to pay the tuition, but, if you do decide to full-time go back to school, you're also, and leave your job in order to do that, you're losing out on your salary as well. So it's a big commitment and a big change. And I can't really sugarcoat it in any other way other than, um, like I said, do your best to like talk to the financial aid office to see what sorts of merit-based or need-based scholarship they might be able to provide you. And you might even be able to kind of like, if you have multiple offers from different schools, like you can kind of say like, well, I'm getting this package somewhere else. Can you match it? Or can I think that you can have a conversation with the financial office and, it never, like, the worst that they can say is no. So it never hurts to ask. I received, unfortunately, like very little, if no financial aid at all when I was doing my master's. So that was a big commitment that I had to make. I had thankfully saved up some money and also, over the years. And also um, a couple months in found some part-time work. So I was working a few actually part-time jobs and TAing. TAing actually pays very well, secretly enough, pays very well at certain schools. So I would look into that. But I was working sort of like multiple part-time jobs to help me at least offset some of the costs But I think it was a worthwhile investment for me because, I don't think I would have been able to get my Harvard PhD if it weren't for my MPH that got me there.
Yes. And you have my respect for just working so hard to pursue your goal and your dream. I think it's a really nice, nice story. I didn't know that TA pays, but I didn't know. I always thought that people in academia, they're underpaid. That was my impression.
Yeah, I
Maybe I
mean, they
was
are
wrong.
underpaid. Um, but this is like, at least this might vary across different schools, but at Harvard, especially because all of the graduate students are unionized, like they've negotiated very good rates for everything. And so at Harvard, I was TAing, multiple classes, and that really helped with my financial situation as a PhD student. Um, but yeah, there was one point where I was like, I think TAing 3 classes, and I was like, why am I doing this? I'm like, oh yeah, because I'm, trying to do my best to make money so that I can, not live paycheck to paycheck.
Yes. And when you are pursuing PhD, I'm sure it's a different story. The conditions have improved for you.
Oh yeah. I mean, PhD, you don't have to pay tuition, and you should be getting
Yes.
a stipend. So it is
Right.
different, but I also went from living in New Haven to Boston. So the cost of living, that's another thing too, is like, you know, um, the cost of living itself is important to factor and can also very dramatically increase or decrease the cost of your MPH. No, but
Okay,
congratulations.
so
Yeah. Good job
yeah,
on
thank
getting
you.
the first
Yes.
application done. It sounds like you're almost ready to submit. So, I wish you the best with that. And yeah, do you have any other final thoughts or questions?
Hopefully it'll be a little bit easier on my part now that I have something like final, but of course it's going to be different for each school.
Oh, I would take
Yes.
your personal statement from whatever you did. Or yeah, just swap out the school names. And then
And the
obviously,
professors.
yeah, or like, most of your, I always tell people this, most of your statement should be 90% the same, except for that one paragraph about like why this program specifically. You swap that out with the professor names, the course names, etc., the mission
Yes.
statement of that specific
Yes.
program. So I would
Yes.
just, don't rewrite the whole thing.
Yes. That's a great advice, and I'm sure as a student, we all know the tricks.
Yes. I'm all
Okay.
about efficiency and how can you do the least amount of work,
Yes.
with the highest amount of impact. So
It's very important. It's very important to survive the world of academia. Thank you so much,
of
Jessica. So
course.